this is where you pick up another round of courage that will never leave your body. This is where you find out what you're made of. This is where you really go, yeah, I'm persistent. I didn't give up on that dream. I just kept trying.
Here today on Beyond Boundaries with us. And for those of you who do not know Adora, she is, you do pretty much everything. You are an author, you are a collaborator of leaders, you are certified with Napoleon Hill. You are a mentor of entrepreneurs. You're also a co-producer for a TV show, Divas, Destination Divas, and I mean, a million other things, right? What did I
miss? Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm just so grateful. Your dedication to just help your personal community and to be authentic to what your soul is calling for is really, really beautiful. And it's so cool to witness you and all of that. So thank you. This is a great opportunity. I appreciate you and I appreciate this so much. And yes, I have a lot of things that, like any creative that likes to say yes, like you like to say yes when there's a flow, that has me get into lots of projects. I would say collaboration is one of my favorite things. And so that's part of how I end up appearing to do, or I get to do a lot more, because it's not, when you collaborate, it's not all just your resources, your team. What can you do alone? It's you bring your best and your assets together with someone else. And usually you're not 100% the same. That's 100% of the time. We're never 100% the same, right? But I tend to collaborate with people that we share core values, and we're on a mission for, like you, for the elevation of humanity, for the freedom and peace and safety and all the best for everyone. And so when I play at that game with great people who are also passionate and resourceful, I get to do more. I get to be involved in more. I get to, touch and experience things that if it were just me, I would be worn out. I would be worn out. Yeah.
You're such a light, and you bring energy to the room. So, but I read your book. I know a little bit of your story, and I know that life has not always been easy for you. So, would you mind, can we dive in a little bit to some of those struggles you had maybe when you were a child, and then into your teenage years, and it went into your 20s. So, I don't think you can get out of this life without any kind of trauma, but some people have more than others. So if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about yours, and then how you got out of it. So tell me about you when you were a child.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. And before we jump into that, it wasn't always easy, I want to make sure that I'm clear that I, all the way up until last week, have hard moments still. Like if you are a human being and you are sober the majority of the time, and so then you are confronted with anything from homelessness to an argument with your child, there are hard moments for all of us. So Now, while I think I live in so much grace and I live in so much, I have a lot of tools for thinking well, for redirecting myself, for moving myself back to, resilience, to optimism, to owning when I've said something in a way that, is right as I thought I was, wasn't, what doesn't represent, it doesn't look like this, like right now when I'm like, I'm the light in the room, I'm so happy to be here. I've overcome so much and I get to help you, right? And I think that's so important to presence, even before I go into the other parts, because I remember, years in my 20s, and shoot, I keep saying last week because things will come up and where I would be looking at someone else that's further along in an area that I'm moving in, or I say matters to me, and go, oh, like, I have so far to go. Are you sure? What is wrong with you? Get it together. Or like, why, and it's just, it's not real, right? Like everybody, I have a mentor who's 90 years old and he is a thought leader in this space. Dennis Waitley wrote The Psychology of Winning, was on the board of the directors for the US Olympics. He was in the movie The Secret. He's a mentor to Bob Proctor, John Maxwell, Les Brown, all these big guys. And do you know that man still will tell me, Adora, you know what? I did something today and it's not who I'm committed to being. And here's how I'm going to change how I'm thinking. And, he told me once that success is more like a toll road than a destination. Like you keep paying the dues, even if the dues are affirmations and gratitude and being in a great community and working out and going to therapy and, but it's just like anything. Like we shower daily for a reason, we brush our teeth daily. I hope you do anyway, right? I know you do. Your teeth are super white. So, we're about, before I go into this childhood piece, what I just said is relevant. And it's important to remember because especially when we get momentum or you get on this great track or you really want to get it so right and you want to do such a great job and you have this high standard and then something like COVID happens and then there's flourishing and then something like, real estate has changed, business has changed, this has changed, there's a pullback. People go, what was I thinking? Am I on the right path? Am I as good as everybody? Maybe I should, all kinds of thoughts can come up. And I think it's really important to know, like, welcome to the party. That's, that's normal. They're like every great movie, every great team, every great, athlete has these moments when people are going, why did we even draft that guy? Why is he on the team? He just ruined it, and then the next moment, the whole world is celebrating them. Or, maybe there's an injury and they're on the sidelines and now everybody's talking about someone else, right? And so if you're in a game of contribution, if you're playing for your highest, greatest version, and I know that looks different at different times, depending on what's going on. If you've got a house full of kids or, you're just got married or just got divorced or whatever, that it's part of the journey is that as much as there are beautiful, great, super high moments, there are a lot of really hard moments too. And that doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. Like all the therapy, all the psychology, now how you deal with it, how you perceive it, what you make it mean about you, about life, about God, about love, about money, about sex, about anything. That's the part that we get to choose, and that we have some faculty over. And a lot of that happens subconsciously, right? And that's why the work that you're so dedicated to, that I'm so dedicated to, goes. Okay, so we'll dive into the story, because it's like blah, 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 talking men, right? We like get on these passion rants. Go ahead.
You're totally right. We'll always go through struggles, no matter how far you've been. And it's kind of refreshing to hear that somebody like you, somebody that I look up to, and I'm like, wow, she's got it all together. She's written her book. She's out there doing the work to help everyone else. That's who I want to be. It's kind of refreshing to hear that you still have moments where you're like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough? But
I know that feeling. It's refreshing for me when my people have moments too. I'm like, oh,
Dennis,
and you know what?
Years old.
Well, and that's been up a lot lately. Like friends that have called, colleagues, and that's part of why I camped out there for a minute. There's certain patterns in life, and I think, you know, different seasons, some might appear more than others, but I've noticed the past couple of weeks, people just needing to hear, hey, you're not alone. This is tough. Keep going, keep going. This is where courage is. This is where you pick up another round of courage that will never leave your body. This is where you find out what you're made of. This is where you really go, yeah, I'm persistent. I didn't give up on that dream. I just kept trying and going in different. So super cool. So, okay. Anyway, Napoleon Hill. So part of the reason I'm so excited about the work that I'm doing with them at the Napoleon Hill Institute, and we've locked arms with Russell Brunson and the Secrets of Success Study Club and the Napoleon Hill Foundation, is because at what was probably 22 years old, I'm 45. I know I look like I'm just 28, right?
30.
With this lighting. Yeah, I love you. Thank you. Thank you, lighting. So, but about 23 years old, I had already I lived on my own and with friends and in their homes from age 15 on through high school. I had lived on my own in a house. It was on my family's property, but I lived alone at 12 and could have boys sleep over and just like Peppy Longstockings, you know, live on my own. We went through periods of moving in homeless people as a child in exchange for babysitting. So they got to live there in exchange. So you can imagine a lot, right? You can imagine a lot in there. And, you know, saying all that, I'm always I want to be careful, because my father, my stepmother, my mother, they were all doing the best they could do, coming from their own patterns of they were once children. And they made it better, actually. I've interviewed each of them and multiple times, and their childhood experiences were way worse in many ways than my experience. So I always want to honor that people do the best that they can until they know to do better. And I know they all love me. They all were doing their best. My dad still apologizes for some things, you know. He was an alcoholic at that time. He's not anymore. But all those kind of combine. And back then, there wasn't, you know, rows full of self-development books. There weren't all this, all this mental health is okay, go to a counselor. It was kind of like, that was for the crazy people, right? You don't, to be fair, I think there's a lot to be said about that. So anyway, my childhood, a lot of it was, for many years, most of the memories were the very challenging memories. For a long time, I really couldn't even recall happy childhood memories. Like if I thought of childhood, there were a few things that might come up, like being at my grandmother's or something like that. But the majority of the memories were the molestations, the moving, the different experiences. And it took quite a journey. I mean, the journey is still going, but it took a spiritual awakening at 15, which for me was through Christ, and feeling that, okay, suddenly there's a God or a higher power that is, I'm not alone, that I'm loved, that I'm protected, that there's someone, and all the shifting and changing. And I started to really release a lot of anger, a lot of shame, a lot of aloneness. I mean, a lot in my heart space, and just my overall confidence. I mean, I saw it a shit ton, excuse me if we're not allowed to say that, but of work to do. But that was one of those major milestone, important parts of becoming, and is still like, I'll tell my fiance at times, I'm like, which he has a very solid relationship with his own faith, but mine is like, he's like, if you see two numbers in a row, you think angels are talking to you. And if you see, you meet two Teresas, you look up the name meaning, like everything means something in your world, like, and I explained to him, I was like, look, you were given your relationship with your mom. I'm getting a call. Sorry about that. I was like, you were given this relationship with your mom that is completely unconditional. You know, she's your rock. You love her. She loves you. She is amazing. I love his mom. And I was like, so God gave you a mom, right? And what I had was this relationship with God, with spirit. Like everybody gets something or someone. And I think we all need, I mean, I'm not the judge of everyone, but I think we all need a relationship with God, with this higher, source, even the best, most confident, amazing, connected people. But from my own perspective, that became it. It's one of the most important things in my whole world, is that communication with God, with the spirit, knowing that I'm guided, that I'm connected, that I'm listening. And so that was a major, piece. And before I move on, do you want to say anything or ask?
I just want to ask, like at 15, that's kind of an odd age for you to find God, right? Like, how did that come about?
Oh, that was wild. So, and I know you read the book, so you probably know this.
I want to share with you.
Yeah. So I literally, to paint more, I was drinking at 8 years old, Mad Dog 2020, uncles feeding it to me, so I'd literally been drunk the weekend before. My dad and stepmom, who raised me most of my life, they had just moved to Tennessee. I'd moved in with my mom. I'd been with her maybe a year and a half. Before that, I hadn't lived with her or seen her for like 8 years. And we talked to each other maybe once a year. Maybe I saw her in there sporadically. So she was kind of like a stranger to me. And we're trying to do this thing of like, okay, now what? How do we be together? And it was really awkward for both of us. Now that I know what I know, I'm words, quality time, touch. And my mom is like, not touch. And she's a hermit, and she's got an analytical mind, and she'll protect you by saying what could go wrong, which for a words person feels like death, if they don't know, if they don't understand, right? At 15, I'm already thinking. And so she gave me gifts, and she set boundaries, but we were in a really strained, awkward kind of place. And I remember I had kept all of these items like clothes because I was the eldest of 6 children. We moved all the time. And these clothes, if I kept every piece of garage sale, clothing or clothes that were given to me or actually store bought, I would look in magazines and create all these outfits. So I became this hoarder and I never wore the same outfit twice. And I was all this but once I moved in with my mom, there was more stability. She would buy clothes for me. And so maybe it was that, maybe it was this, who am I? What's happening? But I started thinking, we lived in a poor part of Greenville, Texas, a little town. And I started thinking, you know what? There's a girl that just moved in. She doesn't seem to have a lot of clothes. This shirt or whatever, I only wear it once a year. I'm going to give it to her. And I just started pulling all this stuff out with different people coming to mind. I had these Barbies, Barbie and the Rocker. I don't know if you remember Barbie and the Rocker, right? I had Barbie and the Rocker in the boxes under the bed. I have no idea why I was saving them. But I thought, this little girl upstairs, she'll probably really love this. And before I knew it, my bed was piled high full of stuff. And I was just like, I was high because I'm already energetic, right? So I'm like 15, like, oh, just high on this emotion of giving or the anticipation of that. And the scripture, give and you shall receive, came into my mind. And I just remember looking up and being like, yes, God, that's what I need. I give you every moment of every day for all of my life, and my mom was very conservative and I was very like Anne of Green Gables or, very dramatic and animated. And so I walk out and I'm like, Mom, I just gave my life to God. And, this is happening and that is happening. And I had to check the eyelash there. Thanks. So it's like, this is happening and that's happening. And I remember her just kind of looking at me like, what just happened? And I went to school and I started this giving club. And somewhere I found a Bible and the words started jumping off the pages to me. So it went from thou shalt this to I'd be in school and be like, did you guys know that God buried Moses and nobody knows where he is? It was like, I found this. And then I showed up at a hospital with kids. And meanwhile, kids are dropping out of my club because I'm starting to talk more and more about God. And they're like, this was a giving club. Now all you talk about is God. And, and it's happening to me, sort of like your journey right now. It's just pulling you in this unfolding. So I show up at this hospital, have a couple kids with me, and I'm like, we're here to visit sick people. We're like, do you have an appointment? I'm like, no, but the Bible says to visit the sick. So we are here. It was a small town. And they're like, let me get you on the phone with the chaplain. And so while the chaplain did not let us visit their sick in that small, he just started asking me, well, where do you go to church? And I told him the story kind of like I just told you. And then I found a church, right? And that was my first kind of awakening to it all. And that's why I call it an awakening. I'm certain there were seeds planted by my grandparents or Vacation Bible School, but in that moment, there was a connection between those seeds. Being in a town that had the most churches per capita, was in the Guinness Book of World Records at some point. So it was in the atmosphere, with being this, truly, when you hear people say, I was lost and now I'm found, I really was this kind of lost soul looking and felt that God came there to meet me. And the evidence of that was the fruits that followed, the finding the Bible, the opening and all of that.
Oh, wow. So I've noticed as I'm doing these interviews with these amazing people, again, like you, that have accomplished so much in their lives, and they've come from, struggles, the one thing in common is their faith is so strong. I don't think I've interviewed one person where their faith is not number one in their life. And that's strange to me. And I'll tell you, because I was not a huge believer. And I mean, there were a lot of questions I had and a lot of anger I had. And, once I opened my mind to it, my world started opening up. So I understand this. And at 15, to understand it, to understand that the more you give, the more you receive. And that's the way the world works. It flows, energy flows in and out, because that's what it is, that your world will just open up and do magical things for you.
It's so true. And look, I've had my parts of my life in my 20s where I questioned, is this God or is it quantum physics? Is it Jesus or is it divine mother? Is it Allah? Is it, and I got to a point where I was like, okay, God, my mind and my hard head. And like, I'm disconnecting by trying to logic through all of this. Right. So just, what you need. And then I slowly brought back in the things that worked for me. Like, I love to worship, I love, Christ is where my awakening came from. And any wounds that I had around that didn't come from how Christ approached me or anything I've ever read or seen. It was from, how I saw other people behave and deciding, well, I don't want to do that. Right. So I think, it is complex, in fact, one of my prayers, I have a couple of them. I have like an hour worth of prayers, let's be honest. But one of them is that my faith is strengthened, that I walk in faith, because I think faith is so key to anything. When Christ gave miracles, he said, by your faith be it unto you. When, Napoleon Hill talks about faith, when we're casting a vision for our life, we have to have just even a little faith that it could work out for that to happen. When you put yourself on a dating site, you got to have faith that is anyone, hello, is it me you're searching for? Right. Like, everything requires something like that. This is across the board, all the religions. And then the other thing, I forgot what the other prayer was, so we will move on because I told you there really is an hour of it. Faith. And then, this one's kind of a funny one. I really, really, really want that when I want to live a very long, beautiful life, but then I want to be with God and to know the absolute truth and what the rules of the game were. And I want the opportunity to debrief with my best and closest friends and family. Like, how'd we do? Did we play the game the way we were supposed? Like, I don't know why I really need that. I'm like, I really need that. And I'm enrolling my friends in wanting that too. So that if it's a wanting game of what you want will be fulfilled, I've planted it in all of them as well, that we get to debrief. But and to say that, I look back and I think, wow, that was awesome to know that, to show up like that, to really move in the energy of giving. And there was still so much more to go, right? It wasn't like, oh, now this, I think, this, but shortly after I was married at 17 to someone who was going to be a pastor. I was Bible club president. I was like, this is it. I'm going to be a pastor's wife. I'm going to be in ministry, And then on April Fool's Day, when I was 17 years old, about to be 18, And I did not pick April Fool's Day on purpose, but I ran away in the middle of the night, married only 3 months, 3 months and a day or something like that. I ran away in the middle of the night with another guy for no real reason that I could explain at the time. You know, hindsight is 2020. I've connected the dots, done the thing. I had a runaway bride thing. I need to get to my parents. There were all kinds of stuff going on. But I found myself at 18 in a small town thinking, okay, I pretty much have the scarlet letter on my chest now. Everybody knows me. I've screwed it up with even God, and I did it on purpose. I burned the bridge and I was like, don't talk to me, God. I'm about to do this. I knew what I was doing. And so, you know, and I didn't see college in my future. I didn't see any of that. And I remember I was working at a jewelry store and this lady came in. You know the story. There's the smirk. I see it. This lady came in and she's showing me her before and after photos of her body transformation. And I was like, I'm in. And then she starts telling me how she could teach me to own my own business and she would mentor me. And that was my next awakening to business, because I'm thinking, it was like, oh, Rose Cade, you know, she is the one who's going to take me to the next place I'm meant to go. And so instead of electricity, I invested in an Herbalife distributor kit, which I'm not an Herbalife distributor now, but that was a game changer for me. I had some breakthroughs in my body and my health, and I needed that because molestation had been a part of my history, and a lot of women who've had or experienced body trauma disconnect from their bodies, and they often end up, it doesn't have to go this way, but they often end up with, you know, bulimia or anorexia or other things dealing with the body. And I had been bulimic, and I was calorie obsessed and food obsessed and body obsessed. And I spent a lot of my time at that time in total just self-hate. Like, I looked in the mirror, it was 99% what I didn't like, shame, what I was going to fix, what I would eat. I mean, it was just, and so that breakthrough of 2 shakes and a meal and no more calorie counting gave me my first round of like breakthrough, like breaking that cycle of food obsession. And it became this awakening to business. So in that kit, something else that came was a Walkman, or it was a cassette tape by, I jumped ahead, by Jim Rohn that I listened to on a Walkman radio. And I'm going to be cringy like every adult and be like, you have to look it up if you don't know what a Walkman is, because only those who know actually know. It's like totally part of history right now. But there was no sheetrock in that house. And, you know, it was dark because there wasn't electricity. And I remember, you know, looking out the window, listening to Jim Rohn, and he just started speaking to my soul. He was speaking to the fact that we're all headed to a destination, and we are definitely going to arrive. You are headed, I'm still headed we're each headed to a destination. And that if you want to know where you're headed, then look at the choices that you've been making, look at who you've been hanging out with, and so now I feel great about that, right? But back then I was like, oh no, this is terrible, you know, where I'm headed. And I'm already passionate. And this was before we had social media and attention spans that were like 2 seconds. So I'm hanging on every word and I'm going there like a good movie, like, oh no. And then he said, the good news is, and he was using a sailboat as the metaphor. The good news is, if you don't like where you're headed, you can set your sail in a new direction. I'm like, yes,
It's not too late.
Holy Spirit, yes. And then he said, you need to get mentors. And I'm like, oh, no one's going to mentor me. I told you, like, how I'm seen in the town, and a flake and this and that. And then he said the library is full of them. They've taken their life's work and they put it in a, giving their best, most valuable wisdom that they think is the most valuable, and they put it in a book. And so I read 85 books that year. I listened to thousands of hours of audio, because I would listen while I was sleeping. I would listen, when I woke up. And, it wasn't just right away that all the things started shifting, but I got major shifts, like a one-time check for close to $8,000. I got better communication. I started to feel better about my body, or at least how I was talking to me about my body. I started to feel a future in network marketing at the time, or in the ability to lead teams. And so it was pretty profound and powerful. And I love to make the joke that it was all just straight up from there, but it wasn't. Then it goes, it goes back down. It's more like the stock market on the rise, right? And some of you relate to that, some years are like, you're like, is that stock ever going to come back? Is it over? And then pow, before I go on, did you want to say anything or
Yeah.
ask?
Well, like you said, it's you listen to those things, you listen to the books, you read the books, and it all you start to absorb it. And then you start to believe it's possible for you. And then I think believing it can happen and feeling that excitement is the first step, but you have to take action. And that's what you did. You didn't just think, oh yeah, this is going to happen to me, but you took the steps that you needed to take. So what happened then? You're living in this no electricity home with,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that was like.
Yeah, it's crazy to think back. I had a white Persian cat. That was the only time I owned a cat, other than with my mom. She had some cats, but that cat kept the mice away. So it's a very welcome. And so it had red whiskers because it ate what I ate, which was like SpaghettiOs or ravioli or whatever from the can. It's just such a wild time. And I look back and go, but I was so full of optimism in there. Like, I really saw things are going to get better. They're getting better. And what you said about you start putting it in and it eventually comes out. And a lot of that for me, for the first several years, was just that I believed the people telling me that, the speakers, I believed that they seemed to know what they were doing. And they kept saying, Jim Rohn would say, if you don't believe in yourself, then believe in my belief in you. And I'd be like, all right, then, Jim, I'm going to do that. because I it was like a strand, but I would hold, and like you said, take action. The other good part about belief as well, I'm do as much as I can to strengthen my ability to believe and strengthen my faith. And even now I'm constantly like, okay, how can I believe more in miracle moments? How can I believe more in the vision I'm given in myself and I'm looking to raise the roof on that always. But the good news is I often just caught a little pocket of belief. Like at that time, like I said, it truly was like 99% of my thoughts were negative, heavy. There was a ton of subconscious drag, a ton of fight or flight that I didn't even know was going on. But just the few pockets of faith and emotion meeting a vision would cause a round and a wave of movement that looked miraculous, and that happened again and again. And then over time, I remember, maybe this was 15 years ago, I remember looking in the mirror and being 10 pounds heavier than my favorite weight. We all have our favorite weight, and I'm 5'2". So like 10 is like, it's a dress size, depending on how much I'm lifting weights, right? If you're lifting weights, it's not a dress size. But I remember looking in the mirror and feeling nothing but love and like, I love you, you're beautiful. And it being totally authentic, and remembering the years before when I said it out loud, it was just because it was the right thing to do, and because I was trying to condition myself, right? And then that tipping point of it getting in, and it does, it eventually takes over to where the majority of your time is on the other side of that, in the confidence in that new identity, or the reclaimed identity of who we truly are. So, okay. So I'm there, I move out, I get married again. And we have a beautiful son. I do it with affirmations, praying scriptures over my body. I have a totally painless childbirth. I'm laughing when he's born. I was not on any drug. It was all natural and beautiful. And I'm just gonna hold this up because I got a replica of the poster that was hanging in the birthing room, and it's God's hand, and it's basically a little girl, and will you trust me? And it was just such another really profound experience for me. And then we're going on and start not getting along well, start doing he's kind of flirting with girls, I'm doing some things. And so we end up separating, and I elevate from jazzercise instructor wearing those thong leotards. Those are so freaking cute with the leg warmers. You know what I'm talking about?
They were very cute. I wish that style would come back.
I'm feeling it. Yeah. To working in a gentleman's club where the cocktail waitresses, the uniforms were a thong bodysuit, but the sheer whatever pantyhose underneath leggings. I don't know who wears pantyhose anymore. But J-Lo, I heard, was in a lot of pantyhose on that pole when she did, which is a great trick. She had like 5 layers on or something, but anyway, so, and then I progressed from, okay, I see the dancers are making so much money in a night, I'm just going to do it. And I intended for that to be just this short, where I got the money I needed for a lawyer and moved on with my life. But what ended up happening is I couldn't get myself to leave. I would go to other job interviews and I'd be like, oh, you're paying me $2 an hour, and we're cleaning up all this nasty stuff. And I'm thinking of a restaurant job that I walked out of. I remember looking down and seeing all this dirty water. They wash the kitchen, and like lettuce leaves going over the very ugly black shoes and the black pants, and thinking like, I can make my rent tonight. And I remember just leaving that, going back into the club. And I thought it was just hard to say no to the money, because I could make rent in a night, or, but as I did the work, it was a lot of it was about, as a child, having my value, like the people that listened to me and protected me were also molesting me. Right. And so there was a subconscious belief that is where my value was. And so, I think that's pretty important, because a lot of times people may not be going through something that extreme, right? But maybe they're in a relationship that they know doesn't serve them, but they cannot get themselves to freaking leave the relationship, or they're called to start a business or to do something, but there's this, and logically they're doing all the right things and, getting breakup buddies or dating coaches or, writing coaches, but they're still just cannot get unstuck. And that's where the deeper work, whether it's therapy or a book or counseling or but choosing to question, okay, not just why am I doing this? So you keep doing it, but especially when there's a vision you're called to and you get right at the finish line and you're like, there's usually something deeper, subconscious going on in the background that once that's addressed, integrated, healed, then the thing will release. And you may go, you know what, this relationship I was trying to leave, I actually belong here. I'm the way, you may be like, bye, Felicia, and out, but it's that's why what you stand for, what I stand for, there's so much power in being able to do that kind of work. So anyway, we're almost to the Napoleon Hill part. I feel like we've camped out so much on my childhood, but it's important because most of our key beliefs about life, about ourselves, about God, about everything, they're formulated in childhood when our brains are developing. And that's why when you can address that, it's not about going back just to camp out and be right about why you can't be successful or why you can't commit to someone or whatever. It's so that we can look at, okay, what did I make up about myself, about life? And is it true? And does it serve me? And what would I rather believe? And then getting the tools, the support to help that process along. Because it is the way that it is. And it's pretty wild. So right after that, or while I was working in that club, I ended up having a real breakdown experience there. Someone that I trusted, I thought was going to mentor me, did way the opposite of that. And I know you read the book. I'm going to be mindful of just people, but it was a breakdown experience where I went, okay, I've got to get out of here. I've put myself in a situation for someone to take advantage of me, of my body, and I'm not a child anymore, right? And I didn't see this coming, and environment has something to do with it. So I've got to get out of here, right? And I did two things. I went and signed up for Landmark education. Do you know about Landmark?
I've heard Landmark.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I signed up for Landmark, and the only thing I wrote down is that I wanted to believe that I could earn money outside of this job and earn really great money. And I just wanted to believe it and actually do it. Right. And then I read Think and Grow Rich.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a must read for anyone of any age, no matter where you are in your life. You have to read that book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I read Think and Grow Rich, and I was naive enough to just fill up pages with what I wanted to do. Definite Purpose was supposed to be like one paragraph, and I filled up a whole notebook. I told you my prayers are still like an hour. I'm like, nobody puts baby in the corner. I'm going to ask for everything. My purpose is all of this. It takes a little longer sometimes, but when you want all of it. But what ended up happening is I wrote down that I wanted to be paid to interview successful people as one of the many things that I wrote down, because I was like, it seems to work out for Napoleon Hill. He wasn't paid, but I want to interview and I want to be paid. And so someone else from that club, he didn't know I'd written that down, called and said, look, there's a job that I had when I was younger. They're hiring. I think you would be great. You're going to have to pass all the tests. And I was just like, sign me up. I went and got an Ann Taylor suit, which 5'2", that covered all the curves. I put on dark makeup. I buried that I'd ever been a dancer. No more dropping it like it's hot. It was more like, hey guys, I'm like, girls would be, we'd all go dancing and I'd be like, yeah, go ahead. No, because Britney Spears was doing that drop thing. You remember? It was like super popular everywhere. I was like, not me. But so it's kind of overcompensating, but the job, I got it. And it was as a producer on the Discovery Channel for Pat Summerall Productions. And the whole process was interviewing all these CEOs. And I wasn't even done with the book yet. So
it's exactly what you asked for. It's exactly what you wanted. And your faith and everything else just pulled through for you, and amazing, just truly amazing. So if you are not a believer after something like that happens, there's something wrong. It's amazing story. I love it.
Well, thank you. And it's a good point that like most people think when you write down, okay, I want to interview successful people. Well, now we would know, okay, I'm going to start a podcast, or I'm going to look into journalism school, or I'm going to podcast the easiest. I'm going to start interviewing people on Facebook, but none of that was there. And I hadn't done any of that yet. And I wasn't done with the book, and I had not shared with anyone. And so what I love about those moments, and while I'd love for all the moments to be like that, like I aspire for a life where it's just like that. That is definitely in my prayers, miracle moments all day, every day. I almost said every day, but every day. And, but there's that with, okay, what is your vision? Who are you here to be? What are the actions that align with that vision? Put them in your schedule and you show up for them, whether you feel like it or not, whether you feel like that person or not. And there are a lot of days when you show up and you're like the exorcism show, right? Like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's weird what happens when we hit the fear of failing, the fear of being rejected, the fear of succeeding, the fear. It's like, but when I've shown up and follow through with the actions that I say align, then what I find is there are consistent miracle flows that happen that you're like, who saw that? Am I pumped right now? Like, who is anyone watching this? And then there are all the moments in between of you're showing up, you're being consistent, you're getting the results, you're getting the integrity. And over time, this magic and momentum that happens when you're like that happens. And I think a lot of people tend to be one way or the other. Like, I think we're opening up more now, but they're either all like grind, consistency, ritual, hard work, embrace the hard, embrace the grit, Iron Man, I'm thinking of my man who is an Iron Man and he's a David Goggins and all that stuff, right? Or they're all like, flow, I'm just going to feel what I feel and it's all flow and I don't feel like we're aligned today, even though yesterday we were going to be lifetime partners. It's like, it's right. You know exactly what I'm talking about. There's two big extremes and I've lived in both. And my favorite is the inkling flow to flow to flow. It's like, it's so fun. It's so
It feels a little bit better.
It feels better. But as I embraced and chose that I'm going to bring in diligence, consistency, and I had to wrangle myself in with that. Like, instead of I do a live every day at 9 a.m., I do 5 lives a week, any time of day that I want, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Monday through Friday. It could be, right?
You're still going to get it done. It just doesn't have to be exactly on the same day, on the same time. Can we go back just one second and talk
Wherever you
about,
want.
Before I forget, just talk about a little bit, you do the work and you're moving forward and miracles are happening, if you want to call them miracles, things are showing up in your life, things are moving forward, and then you get stuck. Then, something happened maybe in your childhood, you've got this subconscious memory that became a belief system. I am not good enough. Who am I to do this? Look at all of those amazing people out there that are doing it. Why would anybody listen to me? How do you get through that?
So you heard how much variety I love, right? So I have a bunch of different tools that, depending on my mood, it's some kind of combo of these different things. So one is, whenever I notice something like that, I do write it down. I do have one of my best girlfriends who's taken so many certifications in, trauma work, spiritual work. I might bring it to her if I'm feeling really stuck, and chat through it. And we might do a process together of like, when's the earliest moment I can remember that? And, bringing she has a lot of different processes, but if I feel really stuck, really, really stuck, I might do that. The other things that I do are, I have my own, affirmative statements, like you have, like we have, like, who am I? Actually, I'll say a prayer. I might say a prayer of declaring who I am, or like, God, I'm feeling really stuck. Let me see myself the way you see me. Give me evidence. Like, I need it right now. It depends on how stuck I am. And if I'm in a stuck that's really on it and tough, or if I'm feeling super sensitive and reclusive. I mean, stuck feels different at different times. But a couple of things that I almost always do, because I love philosophy. And I wake up most mornings at 4:30 and I start reading and praying and doing all this stuff. And at 8:30 or 9, I'm like, I need to get on with my day, but I want to keep studying. I want to keep meditating, so if I'm left to just those devices, I might just go in a cave of deep thinking and therapies and all the things, but not show up for the people and the projects and the vision that I say I'm here for. And I do think with big traumas, there are times where you need to take a beat, or, after death or something like that. And maybe, or you come up on a big thing that you've never processed before. You may choose, I'm going to take a month off and really focus on myself. But for most of us, we have bills, we have visions, we have teams, we have people that we're still committed to, and it's aligned with us to show up for them and to be present and all of that. So a couple of other things are, one, I love the phrase, when in doubt, focus out, which is again about who can I uplift, who can I serve, how can I go help someone, who can I encourage, who can I love up, who can I send a gift to, right? Because when we get off of ourselves and we focus out and we start generating the energy of encouragement and uplifting, one, it distracts from your own stuff for a minute, so you can not just, really spin out in that. But, and now look, therapists, counselors are always going to be, I think, very important, because some people will focus out so much and never focus in. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what I do is, when you're generating energy like that, that generosity and that openness and that encouragement flows through you. So that chemistry moves through your body. And sometimes it's easier for that to happen when we're focused outward. We're focused on giving it to someone else. Then we're like the portal that moves through. So it's a beautiful win-win-win there. And then the other thing is, I do rigorously schedule things that I say matter to me, whether it's a workout. For you, it's like scheduling these interviews, if I'm going to write, if I'm going to present, if I'm going to hold a mastermind. And before, I would spend months and months preparing for one big thing like that, and then push the date some more because I didn't feel ready or there weren't enough people, lined up. And, but now I schedule rigorously the things that I say I'm committed to. And then I do my best not to break those no matter what. And what I found is that I always feel better after them. I get momentum. I get myself back. The fog is lifted, because I'm in contribution. I'm giving, I'm being who I'm here to be,
And then you could celebrate those little wins, right? That's very important. I know that we could talk for hours about this, but I know that you believe in, feminine power and all of that too, feminine energy. There's a lot of that. I would love to chat more about that too sometime. Yeah. And then also the power of forgiveness. I mean, you had a lot of people that, I don't know, have you forgiven?
Oh, yes. And sometimes, I think the past week I've been praying a lot that I need to forgive again, the same people or the same, because I've forgiven, but maybe something reminds me of something and I get pissed off again, or I get judgmental, or I get, and so often I'll pray a prayer of like, I'll say, I call on the law of forgiveness. I forgive everyone who harmed me intentionally or unintentionally, and I am forgiven of everyone that I've harmed intentionally or unintentionally. And then I'll be like, God, just take my mind, cut the cords, any draining energy I've got going out, because it's so heavy when we, like, there are moments that those feelings are there to get you to move, emotion, to get you in motion, to get you to move, to say, I don't like when you speak to me that way, or it doesn't work for me that, or to actually move away from something that isn't great for you. So, and then the feelings are there to protect you from getting in the same situation again, right? Because you don't want to do it again. And the brain's trying to survive. But all of that energy, again, it's like being a chemist in your own head. When they say that forgiveness is for you, it's not for anyone else. It's because when you're holding it, that chemical pharmacy and all that heat and all that trembling, or however it shows up, the anger, the sadness, or whatever, that's like firing in your own body. And it's just firing and firing and firing. And it's not good. It's not good, So being able to forgive, and sometimes that means getting support, again, therapist or a group or reading a book, depending on where you are, and being able to do that so that you allow the power that you want to run through your system to run through, which is peace and power and lightness and joyful and whatever those are. And as long as a lot of people think when they hold on to anger that they have the power, right? Because it's better than hopelessness or, just I give up. So it is a little higher on the vibrational scale, but it's still, you're the person, like that person now has power over you.
Right.
They're just, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I always think that, like, if just because somebody's angry, it doesn't give them more power. It actually gives them less power. So when I see somebody losing control, in a rage for something, I just step back and I'm thinking, you're giving away all your power right now.
No, you're
Why are you doing that? You're not upsetting me. So, your book is amazing. I highly suggest, anyone who hasn't read it, go out and read it. It's fantastic. There's so many things in that book that we didn't even touch on. And I mean, everything about, your ancestors are also part of who you are today. And that you carry that with you. And that was fascinating to me. I've never heard that before. And it totally made sense. So let's before, I know you've been on the call for a long time, if you have a couple extra minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
sure. Let me just double check. Yes, let me just double check. We've got a call at, oh yeah, we went long. Girl, I can talk to you forever. I'm like, are we sure?
Yay.
I know this is like Joe Rogan goes for hours, right? We went Joe Rogan style, but in Jill.
When it's good, it's good.
I'm like Jill Magnuson. I wanted to make sure I said it right. So I kind of mumbled it down. Yeah. Did I say it?
Got it.
Yeah. This is powerful because we've been talking a lot about not just forgiveness, but about patterns that come into our own traumas. And earlier I said that a lot of the things I experienced, I was in an environment with parents who grew up with their own traumas, right? And no one to help them process it or, to know what to do with it. And so a lot of times in the self-development world, we get into, okay, I'm here to heal the pattern of poverty or heal the patriarch, and let free the matriarch again, or I'm here to, heal diabetes and that curse of obesity in my legacy. And that's awesome. We are legacy shifters and we're called to evolve it, right? But one of the things we don't often think about is that the hundreds of thousands of people that came before us in our own lineage, our own ancestors that spent entire lifetimes grappling with survival and what it takes to be a good man or a good woman. How do you, all these different things that took their entire lifetime to learn, and that wisdom that they learned. And not only did they keep going to the point that we get to even be here, if they hadn't done what they did and survived their way through, we wouldn't even exist, right? So first is the gift that your lineage made it. My lineage, we made it. It's been a really crazy freaking ride and we got a long way to go, but we're still here, right? And then the next part is that all of that wisdom and all of that lives in our DNA. Like science has shown through epigenetics that things pass on in the DNA behaviorally, even things that have nothing to do with our eye color and all, but they're deeper. And so I love when we recognize that, instead of it's all about perspective and where you come from, right? It's like if you're a queen or king, which I say, again, I'm going to go back to, I say God, I say Christ, but people have different beliefs, and I honor everyone, and all their beliefs. But if you're a child of God, if you're the daughter of the highest light and the greatest good, and that's one way to show up in life, right? If you think you're the worst of the worst and you barely made it through, and you're still like, they're gonna X you out of this anytime, because then that's a different perspective, how you show up in the room, right? That's why identity in this work is so important. So it's the same thing. If we approach our lives as like, oh man, I come from this terrible lineage of all these curses and horrible things, then you show up to the game like a subpar player with a heavy load ahead, right? Versus coming from, there are thousands of people that have come before me, and I'm the face of that existence continuing. And they have passed the baton. I've received the baton to go forward and evolve. And not only am I going to make it better, because I'm going after ending poverty, I'm going after this and that, and I am going to evolve it, but also you can choose to say, I am choosing to unlock and honor all the gifts and all the wisdom that my ancestors spent lifetimes learning. My cells are loaded, and I'm grateful and thankful, and I allow that magic to unleash in my body, and standing in that is very powerful. I also like to imagine, and we do this in the book, imagine all the ancestors around you, all those that you've met and heard of, and all those that you don't even know, and their spirits, and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and feeling how they receive that, versus just hearing like, dang, you really screwed it up, buddy. Like,
I thought that was one of the most fascinating parts of your book. It made me shift perspective on my ancestors, the personal ones that I knew. I mean, growing up, very negative, the world was going to end, just really narcissistic, depressing women in history in my family, and just changing that perspective, like it stops here, like it's not going to go on. My children, their children, and their children are not going to have that point of view anymore. And I actually pictured them handing me that baton, and I'm like, I'm changing it now. I'm changing it.
Thank you for sharing that with me. There have been several people that have commented on that part specifically, and it was one of the most healing parts of my own journey. Sometimes even whenever I'm praying, which I think Mormons may do this, but Christians, I don't know if they do. I don't know who all did, but there are times when I'm in my prayer and I'm like, God, wherever my grandparents, their spirits, like, please bless them and tell them thank you and love them up and just like give them the best life right now, and I think all the way back, and it's healing when we do that. And there are times when it's a solid, I need to cut off communication with these people because it's not working, right? Like there are people that is what is required, for a period of time or until, but we can still do the energetic work. And like you said, take it forward and then forgive backward, have empathy backward. Thank, like, yes, I'm so grateful I made it, and all of that.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love you to write an entire book on that.
Woo! You may have just called out my next book. I've actually thought of interviewing the different people in my life because of there's what we're talking about, the energetics of it, the healing of all that. But really, whenever I started looking into my dad's life, my stepmom's life, my mom's life, that was when I first started going, wow, you know, they're not, at that point, I was going, they're not what I think the bar of a parent should be or what we want to. But when I looked at where they were coming from and what they had been dealt as children, they each did their very best to make it better for me. And they won at that. They did win at that. Now, so who am I to measure how much progress should or shouldn't have happened? And if they went all in and gave the best they could give while managing their own and they made it better, then they did their job.
Right. That's all you could ask for. And you would not be the person you are today if you didn't have that upbringing, that childhood, those parents. You wouldn't be changing the lives you are on a daily basis if you didn't have that experience. So there's always a reason for everyone's pain. And hopefully you do something good with it, like you
That's
are.
right. That's right. We're doing it.
We're doing it.
You know what? They're human. They were little people just like we're little people, you know, and we're born into whatever part of humanity we're born into, whatever country, whatever socioeconomic class. And, you know, I'd like to think we had some agreements about that before we came in. But that compassion allows a lot of that to diffuse, because that goes back to forgiveness. When we're holding someone to this perfect standard and this expectation, and we're holding our own traumas, pains, and experiences, it is necessary to honor that, honor those feelings, honor what didn't work, what your standard was. But at the same time, when you realize, you know what, these are just people that were trying to make it too. Right. They were doing their best, dealing with life and the cards they were dealt. It can make it like, you know, these aren't people that were loaded with the right way and that knew better and just chose consciously. You know what I mean?
They didn't have the tools. Yeah, they didn't have the tools back then that we have the tools now. Like, we have so many opportunities to learn how to grow, and they didn't have that. And if we're angry or resentful, we just have to think of them as the child that they were at some point in their life. And I think that makes it a little bit more easy to forgive them.
Yeah. And then you're in Hawaii, man. Ho'oponopono prayers all day, every day.
All day.
I'm 1 minute late to a call. Okay. I love you so much.
I love you. Thank you so much. And we'll chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll share this everywhere. Okay. Thank you so much.
I'll send it out soon.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.